Hello and welcome to the Attorney Post, where we bring you the inside baseball scoop from top legal experts across the country. I'm your host, Justin West.
Alrighty, hey guys, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with lawyers at the top of their game to help you navigate all of the ins and outs of the various legal fields and jurisdictions. Because as always, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, I am joined with Bill Siegel, and he is an attorney over at Cowles Thompson, and we're going to be talking to him about all things business, bankruptcy, debit, credit, all sorts of stuff. And that's what we're talking about today. We're going to jump over first, as we always do, and take a look at their website. And actually, Bill, I should have checked on this before. I want to make sure I'm saying, is it Cowles Thompson or is it Cowles?
It's actually Coles and Thompson, and no problem, because the way it reads, it does appear to be Cowles. And I'm
the one question
people just say it.
The one question I meant to ask you in our pre-interview, and I totally biffed it. So Coles and Thompson. Coles, like kind of sounds like what Santa Claus puts you in your stocking if you're bad, right? Coles.
Just take the W out.
Cowles Thompson. All right. Well, this is their website. It's CowlesThompson.com. As always, we will have a link down below in the description. If you need them or an attorney that does what they do, you can visit them online at CowlesThompson.com or call 214-672-2000. Again, all that will be in the description below. Before we get going, as always, I'm going to read from a couple of our sponsors. We have a new sponsor today, and that sponsor is Attorney Pop. If there's one tiny change you could make to your website that would increase your conversions by as much as 270%, what would that be worth to you and to your law firm? If all of a sudden every client who filled out your form or called you turned into 3 clients, how much would that affect your growth and the growth of your firm over the next 12 to 24 months? The good news is there's an actual solution that can legitimately double or even triple your website conversions. Hundreds of customers, Legal Review Pop, utilizes cutting-edge technology to live stream your law firm's glowing 5-star reviews all over your websites, which Siegel research shows can boost online conversions by close to 300%. Simply visit hundredsofcustomers.com/pop and book a 15-minute time frame to see how Review Pops can affect your law firm and even try it out for free for 14 days. That's hundredsofcustomers.com/pop. And we also have one other sponsor, and that is Rocket SEO, also from Hundreds of Customers. Rocket SEO. Are you a business owner who knows that being on page 1 of Google is important, but you're afraid to work with a search engine optimization company because you know that SEO is both expensive and slow? Well, it doesn't have to be. Not anymore. Rocket SEO from Hundreds of Customers forces you to page 1 of Google safely and legally through the power of the news media. Rocket SEO utilizes national news media campaigns across a gamut of news sites that simply rank instantly. With Rocket SEO, you can boost your website's ranking in Google in 1 week or less with a simple system that leverages the power of major media companies, news sites, and affiliates of networks like ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox, as well as local news sources from the Boston Herald to the Sacramento Bee and all stops in between, to put you on page 1 of Google in under a week, often 2 or 3 times on page 1 for dozens of keywords. To learn more, visit hundredsofcustomers.com/rocket. That's hundredsofcustomers.com/rocket. All right, and I've got Bill. Thank you for joining me again today, Bill. This is again the Cowles Thompson website. It's one of those days my brain just I haven't finished my cup of coffee yet, you guys, and my listeners know that I need to have at least 2 of these in me to be fully operating on normal speed. Bill is a shareholder and a section head of the Cowles Thompson Bankruptcy and Creditors Right Practice Group, as well as a member of the Corporate and Business Practice Group. His experience includes representing individuals and business entities in their corporate and transactional affairs, including drafting and negotiation agreements of all types, and representing individuals in business entities in disputes that may arise in litigation in state and federal courts. He also represents debtors, creditors, trustees, and committees in bankruptcy matters in Chapter 7 liquidations, Chapter 11 reorganizations. His clients include, again, small and medium-sized businesses, startup technology companies, etc. He's got a BS in finance from Miami University back in '79, and he got his JD from the University of Toledo College of Law in '82, marking this as his 40th year of being an attorney, because he also passed the bar in '82. He was admitted to the U.S. District Court of the Northern, Southern, Eastern, and Western Districts of Texas, as well as the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. He's AV preeminent rated by Martindale Hubbell, a Texas super lawyer by Thompson Reuters, and D Magazine's best lawyers in Dallas for bankruptcy and workout. Having said all of that, what did I miss?
That's a lot. I have to tell you, it's hard to believe I've been practicing for 40 years, but I got plenty of gas in the tank and plan on keep on practicing for quite some time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, you know, my father-in-law is a medical doctor, and he is about to cross, I believe, he's late 60s going into 70s, and he's in the same mindset. He's like, I'm never going to retire until they either force me out, or I simply am unable to work. He finds real value in what he does, and so I like to meet people who feel the same way. I feel the same way. I don't ever intend to retire from what I do. So, I mean, obviously things change, but
Right.
definitely. The first question I always like to ask, Bill, is, can you give me a short pitch for you and for your law firm? Tell me and tell our listeners, who are your ideal clients? Who are the people that should be seeking to work with you? And why should we look to work with you and your firm?
So my practice is broken down in 3 areas. The first area is corporate and transactional work and commercial litigation. Most of my ideal clients from the corporate and transactional work are companies, I'm going to say 1 to 50 employees. They're not big enough to have their own in-house counsel. And I'm kind of their go-to person. And if I can't handle it, then I refer to either one of my partners or someone even outside my firm. And most of the corporate transactional work just includes common everyday issues that companies face, and preparing documents, reviewing documents, et cetera, et cetera. The commercial litigation, the size of my client really, my ideal client really doesn't matter. But again, typically it's that company with 1 to 50 employees, but I'll represent companies larger than that. And the commercial litigation is generally, breach of contract, fraud. I'll represent officers and directors on breach of fiduciary duty actions. Simple collection matters I'll often handle. And quite frankly, it's a good way for the client to get to know me to handle other matters. The third area is bankruptcy and out-of-court workouts. And generally, my clients are all over the place in terms of size. And the practice not only includes representing debtors and creditors in bankruptcy, but also there's a number of what I'll call adversary proceedings filed in bankruptcy where I'll represent creditors, trade creditors, landlords, tenants, and I'll actually help clients buy assets out of bankruptcy. So those are some things. Bankruptcy is not only just representing a debtor or a creditor filing a proof of claim, it can include other matters, and then just what I'll call bird dogging that case on behalf of the client. So that's generally the nature of my practice. My firm is a full service firm. And one thing I liked about my firm is before I started practicing with Cowles and Thompson in the early 2000s, I had my own practice and I was looking for something broader and bigger, but yet this firm allows me to charge an hourly rate that, quite frankly, is very competitive for what I'll call small to medium-sized businesses. Again, with 1 to 50 employees, it's not $700, $800 an hour, which is quite exorbitant. So it's something that's very competitive. My firm is what I'll call also. We also emphasize a lifestyle for our attorneys. So it's a wonderful place to work. And I've been here a long time, and I enjoy my partners and the attorneys I work with, and plan on being here for a long time to come.
That's awesome. So let me ask you this: what got you into law in the first place? Clearly, you had an interest in finance when you were younger. You got your BS in finance. Did you know from a young age you wanted to go into law, or was it something that you just kind of stumbled into, or how did that all transpire?
Yeah, that's a good question. My uncle was a lawyer. He was a probate lawyer, and I always respected him. And he and his my aunt did not have kids, and I was kind of his son. And I always admired him. And from an early age, I always wanted to be a lawyer. And then plus, you have these lawyer TV shows too, And so it kind of glamorized the practice as well. But I'll tell you something interesting. So I always knew I wanted to go to law school. And I grew up in Toledo, Ohio. And after graduating from Miami University of Ohio, I always have to say that, I went back to Toledo, and graduated from the University of Toledo. And I wasn't always sure I was going to practice law, because law law gives one many opportunities in the business world. So when I graduated, though, I figured, okay, I'm going to learn how to practice law. And if I want to do something different down the road, I can do it, go either in-house or work for a company in other areas. And that's why I was a finance major too. I wanted to give myself an opportunity to perhaps work for a company or a bank or whatever. But as time went on and I got to practicing law, I don't know why they call it practicing. I guess we're always practicing. I continued to practice law and never thought about either going in-house or going and working, not necessarily in a legal position in a company, but utilizing the skills I learned in law. So I'm a private practice practitioner. Cowles and Thompson is about a 40-person firm. And we are what you would call a regional firm for the most part. Most of our clients are in Texas, though we do handle matters outside of Texas. And quite frankly, in the bankruptcy area, I handle matters all over the country representing clients, because bankruptcy is a federal practice. So I can practice in the federal courts throughout the United States, whereas, state law issues are primarily in Texas. So most of my commercial litigation and my transactional and corporate work is in Texas. So I've got a client now that I'm reviewing an agreement that will encompass Colorado law. So I've got to bone up on some Colorado law.
So what took you to Texas, by the way? You seemed very in your early days attached to Ohio. What brought you down to Texas?
It's funny you asked that.
And do you still consider yourself an American citizen, or are you a citizen of the great nation of Texas?
I'm an American citizen, but many people in Texas consider themselves Texans first and Americans second. We were a republic. We were under 6 flags, by the way.
Yeah.
And one of them was the Republic of Texas. But I liked Toledo, but I'd always wanted to venture out. And with my family being in Toledo, I had several opportunities after graduating University of Toledo of working for firms, some of whom I clerked with while in law school. But I knew if I took a job in Toledo, I would never leave Toledo, and I would always regret it. And I figured while I was young, broke, and no family, I could take the risk of moving to Dallas and without a job, which I didn't have a job, and trying to make a go of it. And I figured the worst thing that could happen was I come back to Toledo with my tail between my legs, and I worked for my uncle. I had opportunities with the DA's office and with a couple firms I'd clerked with. But things continued to develop in Dallas, and getting a job in Dallas and establishing roots in Dallas. And I like Dallas. It's a great place to work. And by the way, when I moved to Dallas, there were people all over the country moving to Texas, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, and Austin, because it's a great place to work. And unlike some other cities where sometimes it helps to know someone to get a job, if you're energetic and you want to work, you can move to Texas and find something that'll work for you.
I've heard people say Texas is very much still a frontier when it comes to the business world. It's not unregulated, but a lot less regulation. That's why you see a big influx coming in from West Coast states, that there's a lot of regulation and whatnot. And it does sound still like they embody that American spirit of, you can make of yourself what you can make of yourself.
Very entrepreneurial, and quite frankly, people moving from the West Coast here find the cost of living incredible here. And ironically, they're driving up house prices because what they're used to paying for homes is dirt cheap in Texas.
I live in a very tiny town, as my listeners know, Atchison, Kansas, which is the birthplace of Amelia Earhart. And it's a town about 7 square miles and, 12,000 people. So it's really, really tiny. And our prices just blow everyone else out of the water. But I've seen the different ratios of the prices from, coming out from California, where, $1.5 to $2 million buys you a modest house. Whereas I've seen down in Texas, you guys are in the, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 range, which is far more reasonable, I think, for most people. Where we are, though, we're even half of that, which is just absolutely crazy. But but I love Texas. Actually, my wife is from, she spent the first 2 months of her life in Wichita Falls. So I always joke she's not a natural born citizen, but.
Well, and then she can call herself a native Texan, which I can't.
She actually doesn't care for that. She's a Pennsylvanian at heart. So, it is what it is. I would love to be from Texas, but alas, I'm a Kansan, born and bred. So,
sure.
So let me ask you this. Let's kind of switch it up here a little bit. I normally ask my guests, just because the last 2 years have been interesting, obviously, with the pandemic, and it's changed everything. Coronavirus has definitely altered the way lots of businesses work, whether they're coming into the office still, whether they transition to, part-time working at home, et cetera. It affects their clients. It affects how they litigate. It affects how they interact with the court. So I wanted to ask you, first off, how has the pandemic affected you and your firm there? But then also, I know that you wrote a piece called Coronavirus and its Effect on Companies on the Brink. So I'd love to have your thoughts on how it's affecting companies as well.
Well, first of all, as to my firm and me, when it broke out and we shut down the office, we set up, everyone went home, we didn't miss a beat. We were scared, but we were scared about production and we were scared about collection. We didn't miss a beat. In fact, many of our lawyers enjoyed working from home. I did not. But ironically, what COVID has taught us is, one, we can work from home. We can offer a life balance to our lawyers and our secretaries and paralegals, to where now, especially with the younger generation, we actually are allowing our attorneys to work from home with the understanding that we want to see them in the office at least a couple days a week. We lose some culture in that, but we've got happy lawyers. And when we invest in our lawyers, we don't want them to leave. And our secretaries are staggered. And every other day, and it's funny, my secretary handles 3 lawyers, and she works several carols down from me. And I never know when she's in and when she's not. And I'll call her on my phone and she'll say, "Bill, I'm here." Because I don't even know I don't even pay attention. And I'm not a busybody in the office. I tend to stay in the office, but I do what I like about the office is just going by people's offices and conversing with them. So in that regard, we didn't miss a beat. And as for my clients, what saved my clients, whether you consider bankruptcy or my corporate transactional clients, was PPP. And so therefore, surprisingly, they seem to be doing well. And bankruptcies are down, surprisingly. When I tell people that, they're surprised. But PPP saved a number of clients. Now, whether or not that will change is another story. And it's hard to tell, but I'll also say Texas is a bit unique in that I think at least Dallas is doing well economically. Now, you still have, retail probably suffering, including restaurants, but many of them just shut down. But sure, people are suffering, but they're trying to work outside the box. And I think because of PPP, I didn't get panicked phone calls. I do have one client who was forced to shut down and debating whether or not to file his company into bankruptcy or not. And there's several other clients like that, but they're really trying to hang on. And, the good news is in both these cases, creditors are willing to work, but they're not really willing to write off the debt. So, and a lot of these cases depend on whether or not the owner has signed a personal guarantee, which can affect one's decision to shut down a company and and whether or not they're in a position to not only file their company into bankruptcy, but arguably, personal bankruptcy as well.
Gotcha. Now, do you have any knowledge or insight? I've heard that there were a number of companies, and I had a couple of friends who were attorneys suggest that I'm a one-man show. He's like, you should totally take out a PPP loan and then hire your wife and pay her an exorbitant salary. I'm like, that doesn't sound legal. Have you had a lot of experience with people or knowledge of people engaging in fraudulent PPP borrowing practices, or do you think it was pretty much above the board? Because I'd heard recently that they were cracking down, the new administration, or the now year-old administration, on abuses of the PPP system. So I didn't know if that's something that you have any insight on, or.
I had many clients who got PPP loans, and I've not had one personal instance of a client calling me in a panic saying, I'm being audited, I'm being investigated, though I have heard the same thing, that they're starting to more fully investigate some of these PPP loans. But I personally have not received a panicked phone call in that regard.
Well, I guess that's good news for
Yeah.
for you and your clients at the very least. I had very mixed feelings, and again, we don't have to get into the politics of all this. I had very mixed feelings on what they were doing. I do think that program was good. Anytime you have government forcing a shutdown, then if government is the cause of the problem, then it needs to be at least offer some sort of way to ameliorate some of that problem. Now, whether this is a long-term solution or not, or whether it causes more problems in the long run, is hard to say. We can leave it at that unless you want to dig into it. But
it definitely was a Band-Aid, and
yes,
there were, I did have clients who needed it.
Mm-hmm.
That I'll say, and I can tell you, bankruptcy filings were severely down. So we'll see how it goes in the future.
Now, is that across the board, or is that amongst your clients?
It's across the board in the U.S. There's some prognosticators who are saying expect increased filings in the second, third quarter, fourth quarter of the year, because now you've got supply chain issues.
Yeah.
And then you've got Ukraine issues. Now the energy business is doing quite well, and for a number of years they weren't.
Yeah.
So, it's all cyclical, but at this point in time, that's what I'm hearing.
Gotcha. Yeah, I kind of wondered if, in certain situations, the Band-Aid just postpones the inevitable, and then, a year and a half later, you see them still collapse like they were going to collapse, in which case do you count that as, how do you factor all that in as to, what was the real cause? What was the real effect? Is it all
right?
It's hard to know. And I think some of that stuff we may just never know the answer to, which is frustrating if you're analytical, but it is what it is. So can only do so much. Okay, so let's change foot again here. One of my favorite questions to ask my clients, I like to get to know you. And one of the best ways to get to know someone is to know where they succeed, but also where they fail. And I'm a firm believer, my listeners know this, that you never really fail unless you just accept failure and move on and don't learn anything from it. But anytime you experience a setback, but you learn from it, it's actually a slow burn win. So can you let our listeners know, Bill, about a time when in your practice of law, whether early on or recently, you failed? Maybe minor fail, maybe you just miserably failed. But a time when you failed, but then also what you learned from it, and how you bring that forward into helping out your current clients in your current practice of law.
So I'll tell you, when I was a young associate, I handled the sale of a business, and we were negotiating against a very sophisticated buyer, and my clients were not that sophisticated. They were what we call down here good old boys who were selling a manufacturing business. And I learned during that process that one, and this continues, lawyers have a lot of power. Lawyers have the power to kill a deal when arguably the deal should not have been killed. And there were certain terms in this asset purchase agreement that were somewhat onerous. And yet I probably wasn't as familiar with certain standard provisions that were in here that I thought were onerous, but arguably were pretty standard in the industry. They were still onerous. They could have been negotiated, but the buyer took a hard line. And I explained the terms of this 30-page agreement to my client. And in discussing some of these onerous provisions, I scared the heck out of them. And I killed the deal, or they chose not to proceed. And it was, as I thought about it, I kind of felt like I should have handled the matter differently, and kind of said, well, these are onerous. We might be able to do this, that, and the other, but you're probably not going to get a whole lot different. And I've learned that when I explain deals with clients, I start out by telling them, I've got a lot of power. I can scare the heck out of you. But these are certain provisions that you're going to find onerous. The issue is, can you live with it or not? And how bad do you want to sell? Now, the good news is, after that deal was killed, another buyer came along and they were able to sell their business. And it was roughly at the same price. And we were able to negotiate a deal, but I handled it much differently. And I learned a lesson that I've never forgotten, and I've passed down to other attorneys. You know, a lot of people, and I'll say this too, many clients have, sure, they'll tell lawyer jokes, but they really respect what a lawyer says.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also important, though, for the lawyer to listen to the client, because the client lives with the issue, whether it's a deal or a litigation matter, lives with it 24/7. The lawyer doesn't. And I can't tell you how many times when I've let a client talk about an issue and ask questions, or just continue to talk, that I think of things that I would never have thought of. Some are good, some are bad. The other thing I'll pass down to a client, to any of you, is tell your lawyer the good, the bad, and the ugly. As lawyers, we don't like surprises. And you don't want your lawyer to be surprised, because that's going to ultimately hurt you.
Yeah.
So, you know, spill your guts out to your lawyer, because when you're going into a deal and you're trying to hide something that you need to disclose, or you're going into litigation and your lawyer doesn't know the whole facts, well, the other side may, and you don't want to be surprised during a deposition or at time of trial, because that's going to dictate whether you settle and how much you settle for. The other thing I'll get into, and if I'm jumping the gun on you, just slow me down.
No, it's your show, man.
When you go to trial, it's a crapshoot. Any lawyer who's tried a case will tell you that they've won cases they should have lost, and they've lost cases they should have won. And many times a settlement, a good settlement, they'll say, is sometimes when both clients don't like the deal, when the opposing party. Now, that's not always the case, but in a settlement, you can control how much you're going to get, or how much you're going to pay, or what you agree to do. One time I tried a case. These were two business partners. You know, a business dispute is like a divorce.
Yeah.
It's not only economic, but it's emotional. And tried this case for 3 days in front of a judge. And the lawyer and I got along. Our clients didn't like each other, but the opposing lawyer and I got along. And both my client and the opposing party had claims against each other. And after, you know, the judge's ruling basically split the baby. My client didn't get anything, and the opposing party didn't get anything. And I forget what the judge's reasoning was. It was a while ago. But when the judge got up and left, and the opposing lawyer and I were walking out after our clients left, after we'd spoken to our clients. He said, Bill, did you understand why that judge ruled? I said, and did that ever occur to you? I said, absolutely not. So sometimes you get a decision that you never even thought of and arguably disagreed with, but by then it's too late.
Right.
So those are some of my war stories. Those are some of my counseling. I told you what I kind of viewed as my biggest learning experience, kind of a failure, but the good news is my clients were able to sell the business.
Gotcha. Well, let's put the shoe on the other foot then. Tell our clients, or tell our listeners rather, about maybe one of your biggest successes. What's one of the cases that you're most proud of, the feather you put in your cap, or just a time when you think you made maybe the biggest difference you could have made?
Probably my biggest success was actually a pro bono matter. I was representing this nonprofit and wasn't charging them anything. And they were in a financial predicament and also were being threatened to be foreclosed on. They owned a piece of property and they provided a home for troubled kids and would provide them with some educational means to improve themselves. And I think my biggest win and the thing I was most proud of was, one, we were able to restructure the debt where the client could hold on to the property that housed these, what I'll call young men who were being trained for some vocational purposes. And ultimately, it led to someone contributing significant sums of money, allowing them to actually pay off the loan. And this is a thriving nonprofit now.
Wow.
And it was such a good feeling. Many times, even when I win a case, sometimes the client isn't totally happy because they had to pay me to do so. Another lesson for you people out there is the reason why you file suit may be different than the reason why you settle. Sometimes when you file suit, it's emotional. Mm-hmm. But then as the litigation drags on, it should become more of a cost benefit. So, sometimes when a client comes to me, I ask them, what are you expecting to get out of this? And in that, I will also discuss, sometimes they've been wronged, but they haven't been damaged economically. Right. So we discuss, what are your damages? We discuss how much it's going to cost. If you go to trial, it's expensive. That doesn't mean you don't file suit, but you may file suit to try to settle. So those are things that I like to discuss in the beginning so that the client goes in with eyes wide open. So at the end of the day, no lawyer wants the client to say, well, if I had known this, had you told me that, I would not have done this or that. So be open with your lawyer, and hopefully your lawyer is open to you.
That makes sense. What do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions people bring into your office when they come to work with you, other than maybe I don't have to disclose everything to my attorney?
That they're going to win. And sometimes, and the biggest misconception is, even if they win, then you got to collect on the judgment. Just because you get a judgment against someone doesn't mean you're going to collect. So, one of the things I discuss with my client is your judgment collectible? Now, I've represented a number of landlords where tenant leaves, walks the premises. Arguably, it's because the tenant can't afford to pay the rent. Tenant's business is suffering. I've got some landlords say, I don't care if I collect. I need to send a message to my other tenants telling them I'm going to sue them. But there are other instances, and I have businesses who will do that too, to let their customers know that they're not afraid to sue. But I always have that conversation. That judgment may not be worth the paper it's written on. but, have gun, I'll fight. But, I want my clients to go in with eyes wide open.
Very, very Texas answer right there. Have gun will travel. Have gun will suit if necessary.
That's right.
So let me ask you this then. If you could go back in time and you could meet young William, fresh out of law school, knowing the journey that you're on right now, is there any advice you would give to yourself that would change the trajectory you went on? Or what would you say to a younger version of yourself?
I have to tell you, I'm not so sure I would have done anything differently. I was sad to leave Toledo, but I think it was the best thing that happened to me. I met a wonderful woman who's now my wife. I've got 2 kids. But even the path I took, and it wasn't an easy path, of my first job and my second job, and the things I saw and did, I don't think I'd do any differently. It wasn't always easy. But, I hustled. I wasn't afraid to knock on doors, and I wasn't afraid to ask for a job. The practice of law has changed, and this is probably more directed to future lawyers and actually professionals, where there's more of an emphasis on getting clients and networking. And, as a young lawyer, you generally don't want to do that. One, you want to learn how to practice law. But then there comes a time where you need to get out and hustle for your own clients. And that's where the practice has changed, where you didn't have to do as much of that before I started practicing. So if I would do something different, arguably I would have been more client focused before I ever was. By the time I joined Cowles and Thompson, I had clients. But one of the reasons why I left the bankruptcy boutique firm that I joined, where I learned bankruptcy, was the economy was getting better. And I felt it was time for me to go develop my own client base, because that was my security. And that's another one of the reasons why I became a lawyer, is I wanted to control my own destiny. And sometimes, people don't have to worry about that. But, sometimes when you're with a company for a certain number of years and they find someone younger to do your job, sometimes you're the odd person out. So so bottom line is, I'm not so sure I do a whole lot differently.
That's awesome. There's nothing wrong with that answer at all.
Yeah.
I think there's real wisdom in finding out that you like where you are, and understanding that, again, as I said earlier, even the mistakes, the failures along the way were just stepping stones that led you to understand things in a way that you wouldn't have understood otherwise. I mean, as they say, failure is the greatest teacher. So
that's exactly it. When you get knocked down, you got to get right back up.
So, and I totally get the entrepreneurial spirit as well. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life as well. I believe in doing my own thing and whatnot. So, and it's, again, very, very Texas attitude. So, well, here in a minute, I'm going to give you my magical pen, and I've actually upgraded. This is now a Sharpie S Gel. I usually use an InkJoy. I'm not sponsored by either company, but I like both pens. They write really well. But this one actually is also a magical pen, as my listeners know. And with this pen, Bill, you can change any law on the books. And this can be a major law with sweeping ramifications for every single business in the world, or in the country, in Texas, whatever happens to be. Or it could be a tiny little law that forces you to fill out forms in triplicate 8 times a week that just drives you absolutely nuts. So think about that for a minute. While you're thinking, we're going to jump back over and take another look at your website. This is Cowles and Thompson, and you can see the various practice areas that they do. Again, you can visit CowlesThompson.com in order to take a look at their site. Link down below in the description, as always. And of course, their number is 214-672-2000. And of course, they have a contact us form, and I'm sure you guys always do consultations. If people have a question, they can reach out and figure out what their standing is before they bring you on. So please feel free to do that. Our final sponsor today is Groove Pages, which is something I'm a big fan of. If you love spending $5,000 for new websites, and you love monthly hosting bills of $70, $80, $90 a month to host on a platform that allows you to sell a product to your potential clients or customers, then, keep doing whatever it is you're doing. But if you're like me, you hate that stuff. And that's why I personally recommend Groove Pages, the all new, all-in-one funnel website sales platform from internet marketing legend Mike Filsaime. Visit theattorneypost.com/groove to sign up for free and build a complete site at no cost. Really, a complete site at no cost, allowing you to buy and sell and give things to your clients. Groove Pages really is a Swiss Army knife of a website, incorporating all sorts of aspects from various different platforms that are out there, from Wix and Squarespace or WordPress to ClickFunnels to Samcart to Shopify and all other stops in between. It really is quite amazing, all the stuff they do. And the base platform is completely free. Obviously, they do have add-ons. They do hope you become a long-term client. And I actually am a long-term client myself, so I not only recommend, but I also use their product. Again, to get started, visit theattorneypost.com/groove. That's theattorneypost.com/groove. All righty, we'll jump back over here. All right, so magical pen time, Bill. I give you the pen. I do hereby loan it to you. You can strike any law from the books. You can make a change to it, or you can add a law that needs to be there. What are you going to do?
So I'm going to kind of turn the question a little bit because I'm going to speak on the perspective of a client, because I actually make money off this law. But it's a law in bankruptcy called a preference action. And it's designed to allow debtor or a trustee to claw back money that was legitimately paid to a creditor within 90 days of bankruptcy. So envision the fact, and the whole idea is that someone who might have been paid within 90 days of bankruptcy was preferred over other creditors. So you claw it back and then distribute it to all the other creditors. Well, imagine being a creditor of a debtor and being paid within 90 days of bankruptcy on a legitimate claim, and arguably having a significant claim against that same debtor because that debtor did not pay the entire claim. So let's say, debtor owes you $100,000 and debtor pays you $25,000 within 90 days of bankruptcy, and you're still owed $75,000. Well, trustee or debtor can sue for that $25,000 and recover that $25,000. Arguably, you can file, if you pay it back, you can then file a claim in addition to the $75,000 claim, the $25,000. Well, imagine how upset a creditor can be when not only are they owed money, but then they got to pay it back on a legitimate claim. Now, there are exceptions to that law, and this is where I come in as well, because it's not a slam dunk 90 days. One of the exceptions is what's called the ordinary course of business rule, where basically, if the debtor normally paid you net 45 or net 50 or net 30, and you were paid that $25,000, well, then it's not a preference. Also, if you continue to do business with that debtor and you were not paid for that continued business, you could offset that amount. Bottom line is this: on behalf of my clients, I would change the preference law, because I can't tell you how many times I've had to explain to an upset client the purpose for the preference action. And even when I explain it to them, they're still upset. So on behalf of my clients, I would say they ought to get rid of that law, but I certainly understand the reasoning. And generally, if you're sued for a preference, you're also sued for a fraudulent conveyance, because the debtor or trustee will argue, well, if it wasn't a legitimate debt that you were paid on, then it was a debt that you were paid on that was made with, the money was paid with the intent to hinder, delay, or defraud creditors, or the debtor did not receive reasonably equivalent value while it was insolvent at the time the payment was made. So, and I handle those matters all over the country. And some of my biggest clients get paid. And there is a way to resolve that, because ordinary course of business is a very compelling defense. as well as other certain defenses, but it takes time, takes money, and it can be very frustrating for a creditor who's also owed money by that same debtor who's suing them. So that's my answer.
I can imagine. And then you have all the legal expenses on top of that too, which of course
Right.
you can include in if you get them, but if you don't, then you're still out. And
right. And I benefit from that, but I'm speaking on behalf of my clients.
Well, truly benevolent of you to strike such a rule from the book. So I appreciate that. Well, Bill, I've really enjoyed our conversation today, and I wanted to thank you for taking some time to talk with us. I do always like to give my guests the last word. So do you have any parting thoughts or comments you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Two things. One, don't be in awe of your lawyer. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask how much it's cost. The one thing I would not ask, or you can ask, but because many times, so what are my chances of winning? What are my percentages? I'm not going to give a percentage. I'll tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like I expect the client to give me the good, the bad, and the ugly. But again, litigation's a crapshoot. But even whatever deal you're negotiating, whatever, be honest with your lawyer. And secondly, Justin, I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to spend some time with you and your audience. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. And again, thank you very much for your time. So, well, again, as always, this has been The Attorney Post, and I have been chatting with Bill Siegel of Cowles and Thompson law firm. Again, you can visit their website, link in the description down below. And it spells differently than it sounds, Cowles, CowlesThompson.com. Again, link in the description down below. As always, this podcast does not constitute legal advice. And if you have a legal issue, you should always seek the advice of a competent attorney in your area who focuses on a matter that you need help with. Obviously, having listened to this podcast, if you feel that Cowles Thompson is a great law firm for you, you should reach out to them. As always, they do provide a free consultation. So just reach out and get a hold of them if you have a business or financial legal issue that you need help with, and Bill or one of his colleagues will definitely help you out. As always, this is The Attorney Post. I am your host, Justin West. We appreciate if you're watching this on YouTube, a like, a subscribe, and a share. If you're listening to this on any of the podcast networks out there, from Spotify to Amazon to Stitcher to Audible, etc., again, liking, subscribing, sharing is always helpful there. And until next time, remember, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Take it easy, my friends. Bye-bye.